Hello friends, welcome back to Novel Idea. My name is Dia, and today I want to do an April wrap-up. So I'm going to try to record several videos in a row, so you may see me in this outfit for several videos because we have company coming and I don't know when else I'm going to have time to record videos. So I want to make sure to get my May pile of possibilities up. I want to wrap up April. I want to do a couple of tag videos that I want to get done before April is over. So you're going to see several videos in a row probably with me in this clothing combination. And I hope that you don't mind, but that's the way that it's going to have to be because otherwise I won't get any videos done. And I've already been off for a little while because we went on a work trip and then took a few extra days while we were over there to hang out and have a little mini vacation. So just getting into the swing of things, and then we have company coming, so need to get this done. So be patient with me, and I don't know how much editing I'm going to do, so be okay with the ums and stumbling over my words, okay? Thanks, guys. So the first part of April that I want to go over is Alcott April. And I already covered a couple of those books in my first week's wrap up. I want to just kind of quickly wrap up all the books that I did for Alcott April. So the first one was American Bloomsbury, and this is by, I think Susan Cheever is who that one is by. I already got rid of the book because it was not a favorite. I felt like it was very full of opinions and just kind of statements that weren't being backed up with fact of any kind. And it felt like she had an agenda that she wanted to come across with, and that she was going to just say whatever she needed to say in order to get that agenda across. So that one wasn't my favorite, but it was about all of the neighbors around the Alcotts themselves, and the neighbors in Concord, Massachusetts. So then I read Marmee and Louisa. This is by LaPlante, and it was wonderful. So she is a relative down the line from Louisa May Alcott, and she has inherited many of the journals and letters and that kind of stuff from both Louisa and from Abigail and from her grandfather, I think, or great-grandfather, who was Abigail's brother. And so Marmee and Louisa was beautifully written, I think very well told, very well documented. And I still had such a hard time reading about a dearly beloved author that just didn't have the life that you hope that they are actually writing about, so that you feel like their books are a little more autobiographical, and they were not. And so it was just really hard to see someone that you love having to go through so much in their life that just was not the idyllic situation that they wrote about. So, but I still really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it if you are wanting a biography on Louisa May Alcott and her mom. Then I also read bits and pieces. I did not read the whole thing. Life, Letters, and Journals, Louisa May Alcott, edited by Edna D. Cheney. And this I tried to read the letters and the journal entries and such around when she was writing The Inheritance, which was our group read for Alcott April. So I tried to read a lot of the journal entries and such around the time that she was 17. And I would love to read the journals and letters from Abigail around the time when she was 17 as well, because I would like to know a little fuller picture of what was going on in her life when she felt the need to write The Inheritance. So speaking of The Inheritance, let's just go on to that one. This is a novel that was never published in Louisa's lifetime. Some researchers were putting together some letters and such to document her life, and they came across a journal entry about her writing this book. And so they went on a hunt for the book and they found it. That being said, I love this story, but it is very much a finger, you can see the fingerprints of Louisa May Alcott's writing in this. There's much of her style that never changed. However, it's not well developed in this book. And we all watched the movie together as well, the adaptation that was made, I think, in the early 90s. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful adaptation. And I think it feels more Alcott than this book does. The creators of the movie decided to set the book in, or set the story in America, which this one is set in Europe. And so we get to see a much more Americanized kind of story, which is where all of her other stories are set. So it was a little surprising to see that this one was not set in America, and it just feels right to have it there. And so I think we all enjoyed the movie as much, if not more, than we enjoyed the book. All right, and then I also read a short story by Louisa May Alcott called Mermaid, or Mermaids, and it was about a little girl who loves the water and would love to be a mermaid. And her mother has told her to not go in the water, because she is not with her, and she doesn't want her getting in the water when she's not there to watch and to have supervision. And the little girl is visited by an animal who grants her the wish of becoming a mermaid. And she finds out that the grass is not always greener in the sea. And how much home and family and rules and boundaries create this life of security and warmth and love. And so that's very typical of Louisa May Alcott's stories, and I enjoyed The Mermaid. One thing I find about her juvenile literature is that it is very juvenile, and so it definitely does not feel like this was meant for anyone else other than, like age 6 and up. It was good. I enjoyed it. I read a picture book called Louisa. I can't remember who this is by, but I will put a picture up because I've already taken it off to the used bookstore. It wasn't one that I wanted to keep. I did think that it was very well done, and I did think that it is a wonderful kind of, what's the word, reference if you are teaching children about Louisa's life. I think that it would be a wonderful tool to have. But because I already have a couple of biographies about her, and I would still like to read Liz Rosenberg's biography about her, I didn't want to keep something that I was never going to pull off the shelf, really. And so I sent that off to the used bookstore. But it was just more of the same information that I was getting from the life letters and journals and from Marmee and Louisa. So I really enjoyed it. I loved the illustration style in it, but I did go ahead and send that one out. Then for the prompt of someone who inspired Louisa and also a neighbor of Louisa, I read Henry David Thoreau's Wild Apples essay. And it is a nonfiction, and it's all about wild apples and the benefits over the wildness of them and the cultivation of them, and the difference in like location and terroir and that type of thing, and how that allows for certain apples to grow that create different flavors. And it was really fascinating, and I really loved it. I had recently read another book that I will put up on the screen also, because I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it was a very similar kind of story. And I think that if he would have read Henry David Thoreau's Wild Apples prior to starting his cider business, it would have saved him so much kind of his own research that he had to do. So very fun. So those were my books for Louisa May Alcott, April. And I really enjoyed my time with these ladies doing this. Thank you to Tiffany for creating the event and for inviting me to be a co-host on it. I really, really enjoyed every moment of it. All right, then I'm going to cover some People April things, because Alcott April fed into this so nicely, and so did the People's Choice Book Club for Victoria, a Musical Bookworms Patreon, which she is kind of tamping down for right now. She may start it back up again sometime, but for right now, she is kind of closing it down. But before she did, we were going to read Mary Seacole's The Wonderful Adventures of Mrs. Seacole, I think is what it's called. And I listened to this on audio and had a fairly good time with it. I really enjoyed the narrator. I thought she did a wonderful job with the Jamaican accent, with kind of getting that feeling across that Mrs. Seacole was writing about. And it truly is wondrous what she was able to accomplish. I can't wrap my mind around how difficult of the journeys that she took, how difficult they were to accomplish, especially as an individual woman and as a Black individual woman in that day and age. And she was a nurse and a businesswoman and all kinds of things that she did, you know, you would have thought would be welcomed. And many times she was met with resistance for being a woman, being single, being Black, all of these different kinds of things. And so what she was able to do and overcome was simply incredible. And she still, at the end of her life, had such a sad ending, sad tale to the closure of the story. My one critique about it is that it does come across sometimes as a woe is me kind of feeling to the story, which I don't particularly love. And yet, if anyone had a reason for woe is me, it was Mrs. Seacole. I'm glad that this was the one that was chosen for us to read. So I'm gonna miss being in Victoria's Patreon. I'll miss her Patreon very much. Then, of course, American Bloomsbury counted, Marmee and Louisa counted, the picture book of Louisa counted, and the life letters and journals counted. And then I also prior wrapped up A Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard. And so Pilgrim at Tinker Creek is also a book that counted for People April. So in total, I think I read 5 or 6 that were for people, or that counted toward People April, and really enjoyed everything that I read except for American Bloomsbury. And then I did a lot of picture books, and I'm going to wrap up a few more of those that I haven't already wrapped up. I'm going to wrap up a few more of those in a separate video because I want to give them their just due. And so I'm going to wait to do those ones. So just in general, I read a few more. So let's go over those. For the Read Your Bookshelf Challenge, this month was and that's from Chantel Reads All Day. She has a double path, and you can either go down the Lucy Maud Montgomery path or the Arthur Conan Doyle path. And I've been going down the Doyle path, and this month both paths converged to be a book featuring a redhead. And this was my book. So this is Hidden Hand by Emma Dorothea Eliza Nevitt Southworth. And she goes by Eden, so her initials spell Eden. And this is the story of Capitola. What a name. But this book was so popular in the day and age that it was written that there was a burst of daughters being named Capitola. So this is the story of Capitola, who is what we believe orphaned at a young age and raised by a neighbor as if she is his own daughter. And she is precocious. She is stubborn, she is smart, she is funny. And when I first started reading this, I don't think I expected it to be quite as snarky as it is. And so I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it, but I ended up really loving the story. I had such a good time with the humor once I kind of knew what to expect. And so this is about some adventures on the high seas. This is about family. This is a little bit of a mystery and suspense. And we have villains who don't really seem all that villainous. and yet they are also dangerous, you know, but just the humor in it makes it palatable, I guess. So anyway, I just really enjoyed it. And there is a sequel to it. I don't own the sequel, and these are hard to get nice copies of. This one is kind of one of those print on demand, and so the words are very small with very large. It's really not that long of a book. This copy is like 215 pages, and I think that if it was printed larger and not quite such large margins, we would have had even less pages. So it was a quick read. I really enjoyed it, and she is my redhead for my Read Your Bookshelf challenge. Then I read The Samurai's Garden. This is a little short book. I've already sent it back to the library. The picture is going to be up here. Samurai's Garden was something that I thought was going to be a 5-star read up until about 3/4 of the way through. And at that 3/4 mark, there was a very open door sex scene. And if I could have just skipped that, it still might have made it into a high percentage of, you know, like great book. But what happened was the author decided to have our main character kind of constantly thinking about the sex that he had just had. And so that carried on for another chapter of the book, at least, with little other moments kind of blipping in. And it just detracted from the story for me. I can understand why it was put in there. I just don't think it needed to be something that was detailed and something that was open door. And so anyway, it's the story of a young man who is living in China with his Japanese family. And he becomes ill while he is away at college or away at secondary school. And his family sends him to his grandfather's estate in Japan to recover. His grandfather is no longer living, but the estate still exists. And it's kind of a coming of age sort of story, but it's a very different kind of coming of age, because what it is once he is away from his family, and he is seeing kind of his grandfather's estate, he's finding out just exactly who his grandfather was and why his grandfather was the way he was. And just the beauty of family and the beauty of being able to carve out a life for himself, and also the need for compassion and mercy and grace to be in our lives. And the samurai in this story is not your typical kind of samurai either. And that's all I want to say about it, because I think it's beautiful the way that it unfolds. So if you don't mind skipping a sex scene, and you don't mind having to deal with a short time in the book, constant flashbacks to that sex scene, I would highly recommend it, because it's just this quiet, beautiful, unfolding life of this young man who is learning what it means to be a good human being. And the war between China and Japan is ramping up during this story, but it's very kind of sidelined because of what he is going through. So that is Samurai's Garden. Then I also read Return of the Soldier by Rebecca West, another very short book. I didn't really love this book. It had potential. It is about a family estate. This young man has just married and they have had a child. His female cousin is living with them, and he has to go off to war. And his cousin and his wife absolutely adore him. They think the sun rises and sets over him, and they cannot wait for him to come home. But as is typical with most war and soldiers, he comes home a very different person. And it's kind of the story of dealing with some amnesia and some post-traumatic stress disorder, which is not what they called it back then, shell shock, and just another person that kind of enters into the story that is supposed to be helping that situation, that doesn't necessarily help in the way that they are hoping. And it's sad, and I wish that it would have been longer and more developed, because you end up not really liking anyone in this story. There's not a single person that you can really get behind and root for, because there seems to be some strange emotions and things going on behind the scenes that are never really worked out, never really brought to any kind of a resolve. So that was Return of the Soldier by Rebecca West. Then I also read 5 of the Willa Cather short stories in my collection. I read these with Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia, and the stories that we read were The Enchanted Bluff, which really liked it. Then I read Tom Outland's story, and that was not as successful. I liked it more than Tiffany did, but it was still kind of an excerpt from a different story of hers. And so it felt literally like you were being dropped in the middle of something, and it didn't feel like it had a really strong beginning or a really strong ending. And so it just wasn't as successful of a story. Then we read Neighbor Rosicky, which is probably the #1 thing I have read by Willa Cather. Absolutely loved it. Just absolutely fabulous. And I hope that as I read more of these, I find more like that, because it was amazing. And then we read, did we read Paul's Case or the best? I think we read The Best Years next. And then lastly, we read Paul's Case. If I was to rank these, let's put it this way. If I was to rank these, it would be Neighbor Rosicky, The Enchanted Bluff, The Best Years, Paul's Case, and then Tom Outland's story. So all of them were successful, just some were more successful than others, and Tom Outland's being the least successful for me. And then lastly, I have Death of Dulgath. This is a Michael J. Sullivan novel in his Ryera, I think is the way. I listened and read this book, so it was an immersive read for me. And I think that on the recording they say Ryera, and I've been saying Ryera. So I don't know which one is right, but we'll go with their pronunciation, Rhaenyra Chronicles. And so this was the third book. Really liked the first one. Didn't like the second one quite as much. Still good, just not quite my favorite. And then this one, and this one again was just one I really enjoyed. Really am loving finding some of these backstories and filling in some gaps and stuff. It was just lovely. So there you have it. There is my April wrap up, and I will be back, like I said, very soon with the picture book wrap up for Picture This, and with my May pile of possibilities and the buddy reads and all of that. And then also I have a book tag for People April that I need to do, and a couple of others that I've been tagged in. So I have a bunch of book tags. And then I also, because I did go over to the coast for our vacation work trip thing that we did, I went and did some book shopping. So I have a little book haul as well. So I will talk to you again very soon. Thank you for coming and listening to this wrap up. And I would love to know if you've read any of these books. Did you join us for any of these readathons and read-alongs? And I will see you again next time. Bye, everyone. Like if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to.